Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SRHM podcast, which explores new research and emerging trends in the field of sexual and reproductive health and rights, with a focus on using rights-based knowledge for action. My name is Nina Sun, and I am an associate editor for the SRHM Journal. Welcome to the Sexual and Reproductive Health Matters podcast. It's Friday, and we're back with another important conversation that demands attention. Today, we're diving into a crucial yet often overlooked issue, post-partum obstetric violence, and how the pharmaceuticalization of postpartum depression treatment might be contributing to it. We're honored to have two brilliant guests with us, the authors of a compelling new commentary in the SRHM Journal. We're joined today by Alicia Ely Yamin, lecturer on law at Harvard Law School and adjunct senior lecturer on health policy and management at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health, and Lisa Cosgrove, clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. She's also a faculty fellow at UMass Boston's Applied Ethics Center. Welcome, Alicia and Lisa. It's a privilege to have you both here. I'll start with some eye-opening facts that you share in your paper. According to the US CDC, 1 in 8 women in the US experience postpartum depression. Nearly 2 out of 3 maternal deaths in the US happen after childbirth. Suicide and drug overdoses are amongst the leading causes of pregnancy-related deaths, which includes the period of 1 year after childbirth. Women of color, especially Native American, Pacific Islander, and Black women, are diagnosed at disproportionately higher rates. Now, a so-called breakthrough treatment, a pill for postpartum depression, zuranolone, has entered the scene. It's being framed as a game changer, especially for women who face systemic barriers to care. But Alicia and Lisa argue in their commentary that there's a deeper, more troubling issue at play. Prescribing this medication without fully informed consent may constitute a subtle yet dangerous form of obstetric violence. First, can you tell us why it was important to publish on this topic at this moment?
Thank you. Yes, I think this is part of a larger issue regarding the medicalization of distress for people in general, including but not limited to women, and our continued search for what I would call pharmaceutical magic bullets for very complex experiences of emotional distress. And so our work has really been focused on critiquing the medicalization of distress. And I would just like to emphasize that critique can also happen at the same time that you validate and should validate people's experiences of distress. So certainly postpartum distress is an issue, but the biomedical explanations which invoke the hypothalamic pituitary gland and various neurosteroids, well, those are important. Oftentimes those are overstated, and they encourage women to think about their distress in more or less purely medical terms. And then we don't look at the larger upstream or socio-political causes of that distress. And as I'm sure Alicia will talk about, we have lots of data that clearly show that the experience of postpartum distress is very much related to economic factors, domestic violence, a host of what I would call socio-political factors.
I'd love to hear from each one of you. Could you tell me some specific findings that stood out to you personally?
Thanks. I guess this is Alicia. I can jump in. It's a difficult navigation between wanting to extend care to populations that are underserved in this country by our health system, right? And we recognize that in the paper. So whether Medicaid, which serves primarily low-income populations should include zuranolone so that more disproportionately Black and brown women could get access to it. That is clearly a goal in terms of health equity. But also, I think we were balancing that with the need to look at why are rates of PPD among Pacific Islanders and minoritized groups higher than the white population. And there, I think some of the data on comparative perspectives was quite eye-opening to me. I mean, Norway has approximately half the rate of postpartum depression as we do in the United States. And it's largely quite clearly attributable to maternity leave policies, social supports, healthcare access, those kinds of structural issues. So I think that really stood out to me, the very clear connections.
I would certainly echo and reinforce what Alicia has said. The only thing I would add is the issue of informed consent is what's so important to me and in my work in general. In the case of zuranolone, it's being marketed as a neurosteroid, which I think makes folks think, oh, we've developed this brand new drug that has this magic bullet effect. And what we found out pharmacodynamically is that it is much more similar to a benzodiazepine than an antidepressant, for example. And so I get concerned that women are not getting the robust informed consent that they deserve in order to make a decision. So it's marketed as an intermittent treatment paradigm, which that's exactly how we take benzodiazepines. And it is acknowledged, albeit on page 415 of the FDA report, that it has the same abuse and dependence potential as Xanax. So that is really important information that women need to be privy to. And the price tag is almost $16,000 for a 2-week supply, US. $16,000. And as one of my friends said, I think we would do better by just giving $16,000 directly to women who've just had children, and they could use it in ways that would be most appropriate and helpful to them without any side effects.
With women's reproductive agency increasingly under attack in the US, how does this evidence reflect broader political and systemic challenges in maternal health care today?
So I might have answered this question slightly differently a few weeks ago before President Trump took office. I think the background in the United States is that we have a highly commercialized, financialized health system with increasing participation of private equity companies. Because it's tied to employment, there are huge differences in access, which are pervaded by racial differences. The health system really reaffirms and exacerbates patterns of racial exclusion and discrimination in the society. And so of late, post the Dobbs decision on abortion, we see that there are maternal health care deserts that are the Dobbs decision exacerbated these trends. The lack of abortion care has closed some facilities that were already underserved and created what are now being referred to as maternal health care deserts. Those deserts disproportionately affect Black and brown women. So this is really a structural problem all the way through the reproductive cycle. But the dispensing of a pill as though it's going to solve all the problems, I think is we wanted to challenge that assumption and try to bring focus back to those larger structural questions of racism and gender inequality, which are likely only to get much worse under this administration from what we've seen so far.
In the conclusion of your paper, you write, Reproductive justice calls for tackling the multiple ways in which the U.S. health system currently reinforces intersecting patterns of discrimination and exclusion based on class, race, and gender, not deflecting attention through the dispensing of pharmaceutical solutions without consideration of the context of women's lives. So where do we go from here? What should be the next steps in ensuring maternal and postpartum care that is in line with the reproductive justice framework?
I think at a policy level, we really need to revisit the breakthrough status and expedited pathway that the FDA currently allows. Now they allow just 2 pivotal studies to be submitted for an NDA for a new drug approval, as opposed to looking at the whole body of evidence. And so when you lower that regulatory standard, you risk putting to market drugs that don't have a very good efficacy safety profile. And I would argue zuranolone is one of them. And relatedly to that regulatory issue, well, it's certainly accurate that zuranolone was statistically significantly better than placebo. That masks the issue of clinical significance. What people care about is, will this drug really make me feel better and significantly increase my quality of life? And it was only about a 3-point difference on a depression scale. And when you actually got into the weeds of the data, you saw that the placebo actually accounted for about 75% of the effect. So the placebo was pretty powerful too. And then there's the related issue of it really should have been compared to standard care. Women are often given antidepressants, some of whom experience relief from that, who experience postpartum depression or psychotherapy. And instead, it was just a placebo arm. So here we have a drug that was approved with a questionable side effect profile that is not that effective when you look at it and carries many risks. So the issue for me, one of the issues is certainly that this lowering of the regulatory standard, I think, really undermines sexual and reproductive justice, when we look at new interventions coming to market.
I absolutely would echo everything Lisa said. I hope that this assault on what has been called diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is often sort of conflated with a broader agenda of health equity, as well as gender equality and reproductive justice, which have been hugely attacked, and federal regulation, I hope that that will lead a broader collective movement, not to go back to some status quo ante, but to actually really take a deeper look at how the health system is functioning or not functioning in this country. We have the most expensive health system in the world, and it is not producing outcomes that are either equitable or very good for most of the population. So I'm hopeful that the really unprecedented assault of the Trump administration on scientific research and on the health community here and abroad will lead to more collective mobilization to look more deeply into these structural issues that certainly disproportionately affect women and pregnant persons and minoritized populations.
Thank you all for being a part of this vital conversation. This is an issue that deserves continued attention, advocacy, and action. If you want to dive deeper, check out the show notes. You'll find a link to the full commentary as well as details on how to publish more on this topic with the SRHM Journal. As the authors conclude in their paper, at a time when women's reproductive agency is under assault in the U.S., with particular impacts on low-income women of color, we must not fail to see the ways in which limiting people's choices during pregnancy is linked to the ways in which we construct ideals of motherhood and limit diverse women's choices after delivery. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, take care.